Hello everyone, and welcome to our final video on the CodeSign Secure front end. Today we'll be diving into our system setup section. Now there's some very critical points in here, some different integrations, and we'll go through them all now. So starting off, we have our identity store. The identity store is where you would set up something like Active Directory. In our case, we have Azure Active Directory, and you can add different ones here. You can swap it out, but there is only one configuration active at a time here. Now, we can obviously see our client ID, we can see our callback URL to the web page, as well as the connection URL, the identity store type, and the status. If we right-click this, we can go in and see those same details. We can edit it, so if we wanted to change anything here, we could. And we can archive it, so basically making this inactive and setting up a different type of identity store in its place. Next up, we have our backups. This is where you would schedule your backups, so you can set it to daily, weekly, or monthly. And you can say if you want to save the backup to the server or you want to save it to the cloud. We also have all our old backups here. So I can download an old one. I can also restore from an old one as well here. So this is great for different setups where, say, you need to make some changes to the front end or the back end. You take a backup of it really quickly, and then you can download it and restore from it if you run into any issues during that process of upgrading. Next up, we have our users, and this is where the majority of your work will likely be here in the roles and permissions section. Of course, you can register your users here, where you'll put in an Active Directory tied email. You'll select their role. So in our case, we have system admin, project manager, security officer, auditor, and developer. And then you, of course, provide their first and last name and a password for them if they don't prefer to go through the Azure AD login route. Now, some very important points here are our generate API key and generate authentication cert buttons. So the generate API key is anytime during the setup of your signing, you will have to provide an API key. So here is where you would actually generate that at. Now, these are not specific to each user. The same API key could be used for someone else's because we have that authentication certificate tied to the user. So here we can make a 90-day API key. We would generate it and it would provide us with one that we could use for, say, our Windows signing with Sign Tool. Now, more importantly, we have our generate authentication certificate. So these certificates are how you get your handshake between your client machine and the server side. So this authentication certificate is specific to each user. I would have to select a user that is within CodeSign Secure here. I would create the certificate name and I would put a validity period. Now, something important to note here is if I had an authentication certificate taken from me and being used by a bad actor who had somehow gotten all the rest of my credentials as well, then I could just generate a new one for myself and they would no longer have access to that. So it's a great way to make sure that your certificates aren't being misused, to make sure that someone isn't signing under someone else's name. Just by generating a new authentication certificate, it makes the old one invalid. Now, we have our different statuses here on the users, so we can see that, Sam at Encryption Consulting, as well as myself, Riley, at Encryption Consulting, are both unlocked. We can see when we were created, as well as our usernames and our different roles. Now, I can go in here and I can lock my user or any user if I'm a system admin. I can also modify the roles, so I could add new ones, remove old ones, anything like that. And I can delete a user. So this is just a great way to kind of keep track of your users without actually editing any permissions, which is our next tab. Now our roles and permissions tab gives you a breakdown of each role. So we can see here we have our 5 different roles: system admin, project manager, security officer, auditor, and developer. And the main idea is to have a good separation of roles and duties within your organization, specifically within code signing, so that someone can't do everything. So of course you'll have one system admin. The system admin itself can do everything. However, you can toggle on access to everyone with a specific role by going in here. So you just hover over the text to see what you're disabling, and you could go ahead and update, and it would refresh anyone's page that is logged in as a system admin, and they'd no longer be able to download syslog logs. So this is a great way to keep track of your different permissions, to stop people from doing certain steps or doing certain things that you don't want a role to be able to do. It might be a bit different in your organization versus ours. And it's also important to note here that our different roles outside of the system admin don't actually have access to every permission. They only have permissions that are assigned to their specific role. So in the case of a project manager, they can create applications, work with email templates, basically some basic resource management of code signing. Security officers have the ability to do specific things like create self-signed certificates and port certificates, create any API keys they may need, as well as registering users and having different configuration and creation options. Auditors, of course, will only have a few options, so downloading syslog, downloading reports, and viewing logs. Of course, an auditor should only have access to read, not to actually make any changes. And then we have the developer, and the developer only has access to APIs and the code signing operation. So they wouldn't be able to do nearly as much as a system admin would be within CodeSign Secure. Now moving on, we have our email section. This is where you would set up your email templates. So if I created an email template here, let's say I wanted type 2, and I could put my subject, I could put hello Riley, and if I created it this way and submitted it, then anytime a type 2 email needed to go out, it would go out with this content. So this is how you manage your different email templates, and the config is where you set up your SMTP. So in our case, Office 365, but any type of SMTP server that you have set up within your organization, you can set up here. Now, our last few tabs we'll talk about are the signing projects. This is getting you set up for reproducible build. So not only do you need to set your certificate to be able to do pre or post hash validation, we also have to set up a signing project. So there's a number of different details here, whether you're using Jenkins, whether you're using GitHub. All these details need to be put in just so that you can get reproducible build set up. And this is where you would do it. We also have our SSL and TLS management. In our case, we have an extenuating circumstance with our SSL or TLS certificate, but to just give you a general idea, this is the certificate assigned to your web page. So if you go up here and you go to your certificate, you can see, your valid certificate and details like that. Now, this is where you would generate a new CSR for that. You would import a certificate. Anything like that would be done for management of the web page here. Next, we have our environments. I talked a little bit about certificates being assigned to environments, but this is the actual management of those. So we can see we have our dev environment, whether MFA is disabled or enabled, and the policy type. Now, this is very important here. So when you create or edit your environment, that specific environment will have a policy type assigned to it. So of course you have your no approval, which means no approval is required. You can have owner approval, where the owner of the application or the certificate has to approve the signing. And you can have quorum approval. So I can set a minimum of 1, and I could set Sam, Aryan, and Subhayu as approvers. And that would mean out of the 3 approvers, only one of them needs to approve it for the signing request to go through. However, I can set it to 3 if I needed all 3 of them to approve it for any signings. And then finally here we have our needs MFA. So not only can you have your quorum or owner approval, but you can also have MFA in place. And then our final page is just our current plugins that can be integrated with CodeSign Secure. So right now we have OpenTelemetry with Grafana Loki, and we have OpenTelemetry with Splunk. So we're working on more plugins every day. So you should have some new ones that you can connect and configure here. But for now, these are our 2 that we offer up. So thank you all for joining us for our CodeSign Secure front-end videos. We hope you learned a lot here and you have some good reference material to go back to. If you ever have any questions, please reach out to us at info@encryptionconsulting.com, and we'd be happy to work with you.